My friends, good day. It was a terrible death. Indeed, we have a woman who was documenting on YouTube, a YouTuber who was documenting her aeronautical journey. So she had obtained her private pilot license. And every step of this journey was filmed, shared on YouTube on a channel that still exists to this day, even though most of the videos have been deleted. And then she was documenting this on Instagram as well. We're going to get to December 7, 2023, and here we're going to see the result of a system. That means in this debrief, it's not about saying, look, this person wasn't qualified to fly a plane. It's about seeing, it's literally the trial of the training system, whether in the United States or increasingly in Europe. So what's happening? First, there's a type of training C that I call magic carpet training. Magic carpet, that's this. Instead of teaching the person to really fly their plane, we're going to teach them to use the autopilot. We're going to tell them, you accelerate down the runway, you pull back on the stick, that's called a takeoff. After that, you press the autopilot, you have your iPad in the other hand, and you're going to feed it. You're going to tell it what to do, and it will take you everywhere. Like a magic carpet once you reach 500 feet from the runway. When you arrive, then at the star, very big, right in front of you, filling the whole window, you disconnect the magic carpet, the autopilot, and you're going to land. It's a teaching method found in many American schools and even applies to private jets. It's not just on small propeller planes, you'll find this on large private jets as well. There have been accidents where it turned out that the people were not at all able to fly. Why? Because in a way, the student is a customer, and today you can buy a pilot's license. You can literally buy it. We live in a time where everything is for sale, everything can be bought. Of course, I imagine you didn't miss this. Actually, I'm not talking about buying a license in the sense of fraud, like buying a license that fell off the back of a truck, you know, a fake one. No, that's not it at all. The license is authentic, it comes from the authorities, but it was bought. What does that mean? It means that with enough money on the table, you always end up getting your license, no matter whether you're competent or not. You fail the exam once, twice, 3 times, you change examiner, instructor, plane, school, flying club, and with brute force, as computer scientists say, by pushing the system hard enough, they eventually let us through. A license, that's all. And so, you know, in the world of vehicles, of cars, it's no different. We all know people who have a driver's license, who are legal, but who have no business being behind the wheel. It's the same with airplanes, and I'd just like to say, in this pilot's defense, you know, she didn't know how to handle or operate her plane. But in a way, I'd say I've seen Airbus pilots, Boeing pilots, sometimes with 180 people behind them, who struggled with the basics of flying their plane. In a way, in the grand scheme of things, she's not the worst. So there you go. So let's move on to December 2023. And what happened in December 2023? Well, during the year, she took her license. Okay, she actually got it the year before. I think it was 2022 when she got her private pilot's license. But in 2023, she's going to buy a plane. She's going to buy a Beech 35, some happiness. It's a complicated plane. It's a complex plane, even according to the regulations. It's very powerful, 260 horsepower. It has retractable landing gear and, of course, autopilot. This woman was described by her instructors as always being behind the plane, always being overwhelmed by the plane. That means always being late, not just by a little, but sometimes by a lot. She was capable. By the way, at the time when she was sharing her videos on YouTube, a lot of comments had sparked a lot of discussion because sometimes she was lost in the middle of a clear blue sky storm, like she would take off from an airport. And then instead of turning, for example, to the left, she would take off from a runway, and instead of turning left, she would turn right. Then she realizes she made a mistake, and then she starts circling in the sky, doing 360s, all completely lost. There are instructors who said that, for example, with the trim tab, she didn't know, for example, with the elevator trim, she didn't know which way to turn it. If, for example, she felt the control stick was heavy and the plane tended to nose down, she wasn't really sure whether she needed to trim nose up or trim nose down. You see, that's very serious. Why? Because here the trim, the compensators, they're still flight control surfaces. And if we're in a plane and we don't really know what the control surfaces are doing, we don't know what happens when an aileron goes up, we don't know what happens when a tab goes down, etc. If we don't know all that, if we're not clear about it right away, it's true that an accident is just a matter of time. If it's not this flight, it'll be the next one. So that's what we're going to do. I just gave you the context, let's say, of training, which is catastrophic. And I'd like to tell you that in Europe, it's going in the same direction. In Europe, we're not much better. So here, I'm not criticizing the Americans. Often they invent a system that is sometimes adopted even more zealously in Europe. I can tell you that, for example, there are fewer and fewer flying clubs where there are classes. There are no classes in the flying clubs. You're in a flying club and they'll tell you to pass the weather and navigation multiple choice exams. You don't need to study, you just buy a question bank on the website, you pay a fee, you learn the questions, you go take the test, okay? So we end up with people who are on the right seat of a 737 and who have problems with altimetry. Okay, it's just to let you know, but I'm not accusing the pilots of incompetence either, because that's not my goal. That's not really what I think. I think we have systemic problems that affect everyone. Even in medicine, even in other high-level professions, you'll find exactly the same things. And everyone has met people in those fields who send chills down your spine. In any case, we're going to reach December 2023 and she's going to take off with her father on board this Debonair. Her father often flew with her. You often see in the footage a 78-year-old gentleman. And honestly, as a parent, you wonder, you say to yourself, did he fly with her because he had great confidence in her piloting skills, or did he fly with her for a reason completely opposite to what I just said? It means that as a father, he preferred to be there in the plane and know what was happening, rather than anxiously waiting by the phone for her to call him back after a flight and then start worrying about the next one, you know? So yeah, he was very often with her. He wore his sunglasses and he watched her. I want to make it clear that the father has no aeronautical training. He wasn't a pilot in another life or anything like that. He's just a man accompanying his daughter on her flights in the United States. So I mentioned the word anxiety. I'd like to tell you that it wasn't just the father who was possibly anxious. The daughter was also very, very anxious. And she was taking medication for anxiety. She was also taking medication for severe depression. And those were pretty strong pills, really strong pills. She was taking 3 different medications. And on each one, it was written not to use motor vehicles and others. These are very well-known medications. They have complicated names, but they are medications that doctors know. And generally, you can't take them when you're driving, even just a moped or a car already. And she was taking them. She was taking 3. And among all these substances she was consuming, there was a sedative synergy. That means that if you were given these medications just like that today, out of the blue, it's very likely that you would be drooling. Before you finish this video, you might not even remember your own name, you see, because these are very powerful medications. And by taking them over time, you might end up feeling a bit invincible, feeling like you're in control of the situation. But despite all that, we have cognitive delays. When we take them, we're a bit behind what's happening. We don't realize the danger, especially with anxiety medications, which are completely inhibiting. When you're there, you see your own death coming. Then you feel like you're watching it as if it were a disaster movie on television. You don't feel like you're part of it. You see your reflexes slowing down and all that, and it's documented. I mean, it's stronger than you. It's about chemical molecules, not willpower. As usual, this was hidden from information. So can you imagine how many ingredients we've included in this video? So now I basically want to say that the person was completely unfit, let's say, to fly that plane. But still, all the documents, all the paperwork was in order. Everything was there. What can you do? So there you have it. They get on that plane and they have to go on a flight that will take them across Tennessee, a flight of about 600 kilometers. So they take off, they climb to 2,500 feet, they turn on the autopilot, then they climb to 6,500 feet, and when they reach 6,500 feet, the problems start. What kind of problems? The problem is that the plane starts to oscillate. So let me tell you a little bit about it. The oscillations are oscillations in altitude and speed, and they will gradually get worse, becoming more and more violent. Let me give you an example. I used to live in a housing project, and actually there was a young guy who used to repair motorcycles and test them, so he would resell motorcycles. He bought them as wrecks. Although I say he bought them as wrecks, that's putting it mildly. Usually these were motorcycles that had more or less fallen off the back of a truck, right? So he would bring the motorcycle back. And then I remember one day he was speeding down a straight road and he started to swerve. So he leans to the left, then to the right, left, right, and each time you can feel that the angle of the lean is increasing. He got out of sync with his motorcycle. When it started coming back to the left, he was correcting to the right, he was late, and so on. So over time, the amplitude of his movements increased. He felt like he wasn't controlling anything anymore. Then the inevitable happened. Soon you could see him rolling, sometimes with the motorcycle on top, sometimes underneath. And then, well, it was more fear than harm. The vehicle was gone, the wheel was bent, his jacket was torn, all that, but let's say he was in one piece. So now we're going to apply this to the airplane. So what's happening is that there's an autopilot in this aircraft, which is a bit basic. What do I mean by that? If you look at an Airbus or a Boeing, you can turn on the autopilot and it will take care of everything. It will handle everything. For example, on a 737, there's an engine. It's a 2-axis autopilot. So it will handle the lateral axis. It will handle the pitch axis. So it can pitch the plane up or down, whatever is needed to maintain an altitude or to reach an altitude, a speed, or a rate of climb. No matter what task it's been given, or even following navigation, it's the correct navigation. So it follows the flight plan, the programmed flight. It has another channel that's able to manage the throttle, okay, and everything. As for TRIM, for example, it doesn't touch the trim tabs except for the pitch trim, which it can manage on its own. So you see, like an adult, you could almost plug it in. Not that I'm saying you should. Put a backpack, a sleeping bag in the cockpit, go to sleep, close your eyes, turn off the light, and set an alarm to wake up before you arrive. So basically you can do that. That's not the case with autopilots in private planes, especially this one. So there was an autopilot that couldn't handle the trim, the pitch trim. The trim, so it didn't have an electric motor because you need an electric motor for it to be able to give it impulses. It didn't have that. So what did it do? It used the human pilot as an agent to do the work for it. So it had little lights that would light up in one direction or the other, which tell you, depending on the frequency, if it lights up at a low frequency or at a high frequency, it even starts, God forbid, it starts beeping. At that moment, it tells you that you are out of TRIM and more or less out of TRIM. The more urgent the warnings become, the more you are out of TRIM, and so you have to correct it yourself. That means you have to monitor the autopilot. And depending on what it tells you, you make corrections. And then if you correct it properly, it stops flashing the lights at you. You see, we're in a pretty good, pretty simple system, but it's still kind of archaic. We remember that this pilot had trouble correcting the TRIM, that she never knew which direction it was supposed to go. And here comes the explosive cocktail. When she reaches 6,500 feet, the speed is very, very low. It's around 80 knots. So in reality, what she did was let the autopilot handle the climb, except now the speed is dropping. So it was doing too much. And then, because there are buttons that let you set the rate of climb you want, but be careful, the autopilot on this plane, actually, even on many airliners, if you give it a climb rate, I mean, you still have to monitor your parameters. Because otherwise, it will keep that rate, even if it means stalling the plane, it doesn't care. You see, so in this specific case, let's say she wants to go to 6,500 feet and she sets, I don't know, 1,000 feet per minute, but her plane doesn't have the performance to reach 1,000 feet per minute. Well, it will start trading speed for altitude, and that can even lead to a stall. Anyway, by the time she reaches 6,500 feet, the aircraft is on the verge of stalling. Good news, we've reached the altitude, so there's no need to keep pushing and risk a stall. The plane has leveled its trajectory. What will happen now? All right, it's going to start accelerating. It's climbing to 130 knots. The problem is when you have a speed change in a plane, you need to have, it always comes with, whether it's a Debonair or a 737, it always comes with a change in position. She has trouble with the TRIM and is trimming in the wrong direction, worsening the heading, so she'll start adjusting the TRIM. She says, I'm turning, which way, what am I doing here, which direction should I turn, what does he want from me? So she's turning, and she's turning in the wrong direction. So what does the plane at 6,500 feet do? It's going to nose down afterwards. She sees it nosing down. So I made a mistake in the other direction. So she's going to start correcting in the other direction. So the plane climbs back up and so on. And when we look, we have amplitudes that keep increasing. So we have amplitudes going up, down, up, down. We have a plane that's doing all sorts of things in the sky. The graph I'm going to show you, look at the red line, which corresponds to the altitude. The other lines correspond to the ground speed for the green line and to the R speed for the blue line. Well, I'd like to tell you that this graph, which is quite terrifying, is a roller coaster graph. If you look, you know how long it lasts, 25 minutes. Okay, these are the last 25 minutes of flight. So for 25 minutes, they are going through a roller coaster ride, whether they want to or not. She doesn't know what to do, and each time tells herself, if he's doing that, I must have turned wrong, so I'll correct the other way. And we can see that if we miss just a little, if we zoom in a bit on the graph, we'll see that it has other cycles as well, shorter cycles. We have cycles of 3 to 4 minutes. These are phugoid cycles that are controlled by the pilot. They're very well-known cycles. That's what happens when you leave a plane unattended. And here, she maintains them with her trim. And then there are other shorter cycles that you can see. That corresponds to vibrations and all that. And she keeps going non-stop. And then what happens is that at some point, the air traffic controller steps in because he realizes that she has deviated from her route. He tells her, you have deviated to the left of your route. You've deviated quite a bit, haven't you? And she replies, yes, yes, we'll correct it, we'll correct it. But actually, she keeps struggling with the plane. And I'd like to tell you something. You know what? In this case, I really doubt that it could help. Here we're dealing with oscillations maintained by the pilot, and that's very well known. This can happen with any type of aircraft when the pilot over-controls, and the more he acts on the controls, the worse the situation gets. By the way, we all learned this fairly early in our pilot careers at the flying club. And one of the points that good instructors emphasize is this. They tell you, let go of everything, let go of everything. Okay, so you let go of the plane and you realize maybe your ego takes a hit. You realize it doesn't need you that much, that it can fly without you, that it stays relatively stable without you constantly needing to act on the controls. But that's, if you want, like in becoming a professional at anything, it's learning to do less. Take, I don't know, scuba diving. You look at the guy who's used to diving, he's underwater, he's very still, economical with his movements, he breathes regularly, calmly. And the novice, he's moving around all the time. He's making bubbles, 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 and he uses up his air tank in just a few minutes. You see, it's the same everywhere. These are universal lessons, really. So what happens is that at some point there are several pilots talking on the frequency because it was released. The recording by the FAA, but it's very difficult to hear everything. But in any case, something poignant is going to happen at some point, and that's terrible. It's that you hear someone on the frequency saying, and actually it's not a woman's voice, it's a man's voice, saying help us is there. It's the father who panicked. It means we've reached a point where the father sees the speed. You know that at times they went up to 230 knots. That's huge for this plane. That's really the velocity never exceed for this plane. A little bit, it just breaks apart on its own at 230 knots with a descent rate on the radar of less than 10,000 feet per minute. I mean, at that point, it's not even that anymore. It's, what do you call it? Some particularly scary roller coasters. We have a plane that's climbing, literally doing a vertical climb, going almost straight up into the sky, as high as its energy allows it to go, and then when it reaches the top, it falls back down in a dive, with the ground filling the whole window and the speed increasing. And her, it's not always with her trim. No, it's on this side. No, I'm not sure. No, Machine, Google it. Look, it's a disaster. It's just a disaster. That someone was let loose like that on a plane, but unfortunately, I told you, we even let them loose on airliners. What happened is that at one point, the father panicked. He pressed the button for the radio. He said, help us. He heard people talking. He heard controllers, pilots exchanging, help us, help us. The plane was, you look at the impact, the plane was shredded. There are small pieces actually. You have trouble identifying which piece comes from what. The last time I saw something like that was in a hangar at Sharm el Sheikh Airport. The Flash Airlines 737, I was in that hangar. And I can tell you that it's hard to recognize a part from a 737 and know where it comes from. You feel like it's a plane that went through a shredder, and there are pieces like that. Like those cars that go through the scrapyard, they crush them, and then you have a rain of pieces like that. Train pieces, there are small pieces, there are pieces that are they're torn into twisted, shredded pieces of metal. You don't even know anymore what came from a door, what came from a wheel, what came from a seat. It's all the same. The plane is completely pulverized. There's nothing you can recognize at all. I'm telling you, there was a GoPro, for example. There were 2 GoPros in the plane, because there are quite a few setups in these stories after all. One of the GoPros, the 361, wasn't working. It wasn't activated during this flight. The other GoPro, the one that's usually in front in this plane, well, the force of the impact caused the chip inside, the micro-secure digital card, to break. They analyzed it. They even analyzed it with X-rays and so on. Then they saw that the silicon part inside was cracked. There was no way to recover it, because there are people who are able to recover this data, even from a card that's completely shattered. They are able to use a microscope, remove the plastic and so on, bring in specialized equipment, all that, connect all the pins and everything, and read the data inside. But in this case, it wasn't possible. It might have allowed for an even more visual debrief then. Anyway, my friends, that's it. They're dead, you see. And what's terrible is that often it's a tragedy, because you know the plane can become the worst place on earth. It's hard to believe. It's exciting, it's fun, it's nice, but you have to do your job. You really have to do your job to live whole and happy. As the famous checklist says, for those who get the reference, it's not easy to fly a plane. And then if you look even in the manuals, I remember we had a plane at the flying club. I can't remember what it was. But when you opened the manual, the first page, it was written, improper use of this device can cause injury or death. It's Americans who use this kind of terminology just to protect themselves. I'm not here to file a complaint, but just to tell you, to finish on a detail, a few months after the accident, so the accident happened in December, in April of the following year, in April 2024, so that's 4 months after the accident, the sister of this woman writes to the National Transportation Safety Board as part of their investigation, and she tells them, my mom is dead. And it's funny, it's a moment of humanity. In this torrent of technical elements, graphics, Excel, comma-separated values, all that, recordings, radar, and everything, they're going to add this letter to the file, even though it doesn't have any, you see, technically, it has no probative value, it doesn't prove anything at all, but on a human level, it's important. You realize that the poor woman, the poor old lady, there you go, one day, bam, she learns about the death of her daughter, the death of her husband, and then 4 months later, she dies. It's also that human blow behind plane crashes. I don't talk about it much, if you notice, on this channel, because we're on a rather technical channel. But sometimes we talk about humans because it's important, because these are human stories after all. But there are a lot of tragedies when you look, see, prices that are paid very dearly. The lessons we learn afterwards, I make these videos sometimes, you know, because the lessons we learn here, personally, I prefer that we learn them in front of our television, that we learn them. When you're in a cockpit with the ground coming up at 10,000 feet per minute, you see, it's not the same price you pay, that's all. There you go, my friends. Thank you for listening to this sad story up to this point. Thank you to those who subscribe. Please subscribe to encourage me, even if I don't say subscribe. Usually the subscription counter starts to slow down a little bit, so please subscribe. Thank you to those who subscribe. Thanks also to paid subscribers who support and access to exclusive videos keep this channel going. Some people do it on Patreon, others directly on YouTube. They get access to the same exclusive videos. And then let me remind you about my recently released book, Le Titan. Another tragedy, 5 people who smoked and ended up turning pink not far from the Titanic during an underwater implosion. Unfortunately, once again, we see a lot of human illusions that are lost in an instant. A hull that cracks, and there We might have a fraction of a second to realize that we made the wrong calculations, but it's too late to turn back. You can find it on Amazon. It's an interesting book, I think, even though I'm the author, so I'm not objective. But I think it's a book that takes you through a lot of human stories. There you go. Thank you, my friends, for listening to this video until now, and I'll see you next year. See you soon.